Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Why do demons/parasites have to be spirits? Do parasites take advantage of the negativity in situations like the current Afghan mess or the COVID disaster? Are there legitimate educational opportunities in the paranormal field?
Hello, and welcome to the 909th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you on this stormy day from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, and on YouTube and via TuneIn.com. I'm Ben, and those wide-ranging questions came from my co-host partner in Paranormal Adventures and Dad, Paul. And today we bring you an open-line show with one of our newest guest co-hosts.
Well, I had a big spiel here about hurricane or tropical storm Henri, which is attacking southern New England as we speak. However, it seems to have veered kind of to the west and will avoid northern Rhode Island to a degree to be hoped for. So I won't give you the spiel what happens if we go off the air or disappear into the void. Hopefully we will not.
Oh, don't jinx it, Dad. This is live radio.
Right.
Anything can happen.
Well, if we disappear into the void, we'll see you later. Anyway, co-hosting with us via Skype today is Tim Swartz. Tim is an Emmy Award-winning television producer and videographer, and is the author of a number of popular books. Tim has investigated unexplained phenomena all over the world and has appeared widely in the media. And he is one of our newest special guest co-hosts. We're very, very proud to have him with us today.
So, Tim Swartz, welcome to Behind the Paranormal and your first open line show.
Well, Ben, Paul, thank you very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it today.
Cool. Okay, well, let's get right to it. Now, we have people who write long, long questions, and we often don't get to those because of the brevity of the show. However, I think that these people put a lot of work into these things, and we should at least try to deal with some of them today.
Yeah, okay? I think that the strategy is to do them first.
Yeah, to a point. Okay, well let's start with Doug in Texas.
Sure thing. So we will start with Doug, and he writes to us. Since the recent fall of Afghanistan, many veterans of the war on terror, including myself, have been struggling with depression. Your theories on the paranormal are that negative emotions can contribute to paranormal phenomena. Do you believe there will be a rise in the number of parasites feeding off that negative energy? Also, can you recommend any charities that help Afghan refugees? Although I served in Iraq, not Afghanistan, the problems over there have been really affecting me, and I would like to help in any way that I can.
Well, some good questions there. Thank you, Doug, for your service. First of all, I didn't realize we don't really know Doug, but he is a longtime listener and writes in questions now and then, very good ones. But thank you for your service, Doug. And if I don't know, Tim, now. Our co-hosts do not necessarily have the same paranormal point of view as we do, but Tim, what would you say to that first part of the question? Parasites or demons, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I mean, I do think that there probably is a line of paranormal entities that do take advantage of situations, just like the person who asked the question was referring to. Negative emotions do have a lot of energy. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that like all spiritual entities are parasites, but I think just like in our own animal kingdom, that we have all kinds of different species. I think it's the same thing in the spiritual, interdimensional world, however you would want to describe it. And so when it comes to negative emotions, the energy put out by those, it's like a smorgasbord for some of these creatures. Whether or not we'll see an uptick because of what's going on in Afghanistan, I think that's just something else that's going on. I mean, we've got a lot of unfortunately a lot of stuff going on with us right now. I mean, with the COVID epidemic, and now Afghanistan, and other political situations. So yeah, I mean, we may see an uptick, whether or not it'll be reported that way, that's hard to say.
Well, I think that's very well put, Tim, from my point of view. I think we have one of the things that Ben and I in different books have said is that the unity with a capital U, more or less in the sense of the African notion of Ubuntu and notions of unity that have existed since the dream time, explained to me at times by shamans from different tribes, etc., is what is attacked by what we refer to as parasites. And when you look at what's happening today, it's really frightening. Everything seems to be contributing to division in people, and it's division that seems to feed parasites. And we would see this on the level of a family or maybe sometimes even a community. But we've seen it, I think, throughout history on a national and tribal level. When you have in the distant past, one of the examples we use is the Sumerian Civilization, which seemed to start out, according to some findings controversial though they were in the 1930s, that people really started out as monotheists, essentially worshiping one god or one god family. And then all of a sudden, like in a matter of a year, the Sumerians went from being, bean farmers to being lawyers, doctors, and having 5,000 gods. I mean, what is that? So we often say maybe parasites had something to do with it. Divide and conquer is probably the truest cliche that there ever was. So I think, yeah, definitely these things are happening. What say you, Ben?
Well, I think it's, ancient sort of Near or Middle Eastern cosmology is super interesting, and it all kind of, there's a really interesting theme through it that it's meant to kind of bring about chaos in some way, shape, or form. That it's like, all this technology is introduced and all of that, and one of the really interesting things, especially in I guess for lack of better words, in 1 Enoch, there's a really interesting description in how these gods, sort of lowercase g, give out, they give people the technology of metallurgy, technology of music and culture, and also cosmetics. So, and all of those are equated as magic, and that they're meant to sort of destroy, basically what's been built up by I guess, at the time the Most High God, right? And so it's like all these lowercase g gods are running around and they're giving people technology, and it's on the surface it seems great, right? What's so bad about metallurgy, and what's so bad about agricultural technology? But it's like, but the interesting thing about it is that it's sort of a means of control, right? So it's meant that to sort of take control away from us, or and basically make us perceive that we have more power. Great example. I cited this last week when we were, or maybe 2 weeks ago, when we did our show about shadow people. That there's an interesting dialogue. Oh no, I was talking about it last week with John Zaffis.
Oh right, okay.
Where there's an interesting dialogue between Plato and Socrates, and they're discussing Horus, the Egyptian god of writing, and Plato's like, oh, isn't this great? Now we know we have the ability to write. We can write books. We can write down all of our thoughts. And Socrates replies essentially with, yeah, that's great, but how are we going to remember things? and it's like, these natural powers and abilities we have are basically taken away from us by technology and creates all this chaos. Case in point, there's a fun game we all probably play and we don't realize we're playing it, where let's bring up a movie, right? So what about Bob, right? And you're like, okay, what year?
Tim Murray, Bill Murray, and Richard Dreyfuss.
Okay, good. You passed the first portion of the game, which is who starred in it.
Oh, all right.
So good job. Congratulations. You passed that first portion.
Throw it over to Tim's court now.
Yes, Tim, what year was What About Bob made?
Oh, my gosh. I have no idea. Probably, 1998?
Now, our first instinct would be, okay, well, let's just Google it, right? Let's take out our smartphones and we'll say, all right, well, let's, Google who was in it. Let's Google what year it was made, its top gross, how much did it make in the box office, its opening week. who directed it, and it's like, it's a fun game we like to play when we're at parties, and someone brings up like a movie quote, and it's like, oh, it's a great movie. It has, crap, can't remember his name, who's in it, let's look at our phones, and our ability to remember things is gone. I can tell you for a fact, I only know 2 phone numbers off the top of my head. My lovely wife's phone number and our old house number from when we had a landline, which we still have. But that's
no longer... do. Nobody calls on it I want to talk to, so it's a fax machine.
Exactly. But when it was a landline, I remember the number. And those are the only 2 phone numbers I know. Because our power and ability to remember things is gone. And so we
good. I thought it was just my age.
Well, essentially, it could be both, but the point being is we have all this technology that seemingly gives us more power over the world, but it takes more power away from us. So these lowercase g gods were essentially doing the same thing in ancient Middle Eastern mythology, pretty much any mythology if you look at it. It's like the similarities and parallels between the Norse pantheon, the Greek pantheon, even the Sumerian pantheons. You can see similarities throughout all of them in this, right? They give, great example is the mead of poetry from the Norse mythology, where essentially, there's this mead that's made out of the blood of one of the other Aesir gods. I can't remember which one it was. Kvasir, who is like the god of intelligence and knowledge, and he gets murdered by dwarves, and they take his blood and they turn it into a mead. And when anybody drinks the mead, they automatically know everything. They're poets, whatever. And the whole point is that people are trying to get this mead, and eventually Odin ends up getting his hands on it after tricking a bunch of people and defeating a bunch of giants. And he gets his hands on it and he keeps it, because technology is sort of like it's all about technology, and it's the same sort of thing. So we see today sort of the fruits of all of this. Where, there's a new gadget that's coming out. Oh, there's new expansions in AI. There's all of this. And, we think that it serves a purpose of serving us and giving us power, but it doesn't. It takes it away from us, and we lose more and more abilities, especially, right? Social media is a great example. We think it connects us with people, right? It's sort of this weird... abstract concept of a this huge ultra consciousness of people constantly sharing their thoughts, right? You'd think it'd be something that brings us together. It doesn't. It just we're seeing the fruits of that now. It's breaking us all apart, and it's just making us more polarized and dividing us. So the whole goal is chaos.
Yeah. So Doug, you're right, and the answer is to come together in a positive way. Doesn't mean surrendering your points of view, but people don't have horns, so stop thinking they do. Just to wrap it up, the charity question is a good one. We have a charity page at BehindTheParanormal.com, and everybody on it, we know. These are small charities which do things like support an orphanage in Haiti, which I would direct you to that, helpforhaitisorphans.org. They... especially now with the earthquake having taken place, the kids are okay. I checked on that. But these are charities that are worth supporting. Now, as far as helping the Afghans, there is a charity known as directrelief.org. Directrelief.org. We rely very much, just in case we don't know anybody who's running these charities personally, we rely on a site called Charity Navigator, and they will rate charities according to how much money goes to the executives and the administrators and how much money goes to the actual charity. Directrelief.org has a 100% rating. They help everybody as needs come up. They're helping the Haiti earthquake victims, and I'm sure that if anybody's going to be on the ground there in Afghanistan, or at least trying to help them, it'll be directrelief.org. So I would suggest checking that out, Doug, and thank you for the question. Okay. So let's go. We cannot neglect Peter Shelley from Bogota, Colombia, who always sends in some excellent questions.
Yes,
and has actually co-hosted our show.
Indeed, and so we get to Peter, and he starts off with Paul, as a military veteran with a security clearance. Thank you for your service. I would like you to comment on the following. Over the years, there have been various individuals claiming to be ex-military with security clearances speaking about personal experiences with UFOs and aliens, in particular alien entities and UFOs at secret bases, for example. Everything from events at Area 51, S4, missile silos, and aircraft carriers. If this information was true, I would imagine their security oaths would be, in reality, would be there to completely prevent them from talking about it. Therefore, such testimony cannot be true. Can you give us the definitive word on this subject and how it works? Time sensitivity and exceptions.
Well, I don't know if anybody can give a definitive answer to that, except that when you have a security clearance, it's not, you don't know everything. It's not, isn't what it means. It's core mission and need to know only. All right, so I have a lot of questions about this. But Tim, I believe you served as well. Am I right?
No.
oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's all right.
Okay. Well, all right. So I'll answer the question. It's just for these people to come out, especially the higher the clearance, the more difficult it would be for them to do this without getting in some kind of serious trouble. I mean, you have that clearance. The responsibility sticks with you even after you leave the service. So I'm suspicious of this. There has been some information that these people are authorized to release certain kinds of information. The principle when I was in, which was a long time ago, I'm sure it really hasn't changed from the patterns that seem to be out there, is that you release accurate information from inaccurate sources and inaccurate information from accurate sources, and that keeps everybody guessing, and they all love a mystery, and just keep them chattering and have them look the other way. So if information is being released by people who are authorized or unauthorized, who had clearances and served, I'm suspicious about it. I'm suspicious about the information that is being released as well. Everybody, I've said this 1,000 times on the air, but Ben and I often are speaking at paranormal, or actually UFO conferences, or on panels at the end, sometimes with some of the big names. And everybody's very serious, saying, oh, it'll be this year, there's going to be disclosure, and then next year there'll be disclosure. And they'll get to us and we'll say, okay, show of hands, audience, who believes what the government says? And everybody goes, oh, everybody groans. And so, I don't know. Tim, you have any thoughts on this? You look as though you do.
Yeah, well, I have to agree with you there. I mean, when it comes to disclosure, I mean, I have no faith in anybody, supposedly from the government or the military, coming forward with that, earth-shattering information that everybody thinks, is going to happen. And as you pointed out, even if they do, they're not going to be believed, because there's always going to be people who have their own set of beliefs, and if whatever the information that comes out doesn't match that, then they're going to be like, oh, it's just more government disinformation. But when it comes to these whistleblowers, like you were referring to, I kind of set in the same way, that I don't trust really anybody who allegedly comes forward and says that they have all of the inside secret information about what's going on with UFOs, and especially the ones that remain anonymous. Now some of these other, say, retired military officers that they who they are. They have, their record, everything like that. I have to wonder about the information that they are putting out. Like you said, Paul, have they been instructed for whatever reason to say something? Is this a disinformation campaign, or are they actually telling what they think that they know? And as you said, so much of this information is compartmentalized. So, I don't think that there is any one person who has that ultra top secret information. And if they think they do, then they probably have been, fed false information. You have somebody like Colonel Corso, who wrote the book the day after Roswell. I mean, he had all kinds of just really fascinating information. I think that maybe some of the stuff that he talked about actually did happen to him. The rest of it may have been fed to him or put in the book just to make it more profitable, that sort of thing. So it's what I always say to everybody. If somebody is coming forward and claiming that they have all of the information about UFO mystery, take it with a grain of salt. Listen to it, examine the information, but don't just fall into that, I believe everything they say bandwagon, because, what we've seen in the past, you're going to get burnt.
Yeah, you're right. Now, Ben, you've sat on panels with the likes of Stanton Friedman, Richard Dolan, Kathy Martin, Peter Robbins. What say you about this?
Well, my comments are probably going to be similar to yours, but, I think that a lot of how we understand the phenomena is going to need to change, because I think a lot of parties or camps, for lack of better words, profit from everybody just kind of being in confusion, everyone saying different things. It's I think it's a lot bigger than we expect. I think it's like anytime I think of the government being this sort of unanimous sort of blob entity that knows all is just like, anyone who's ever dealt with the IRS is, if you've dealt with the IRS ever, they are the most disorganized, government entity I've ever seen, right? It's the horrors that my poor wife had to put up with them for years is just like, it's just a testament to just how disorganized they all are. And so for, multiple government entities to come together and have a unanimous statement and say, this is what this is, and we're going to tell you all about it. It's just like, it's all smoke and mirrors, right? And maybe it's designed to be that way, where it's just, the left hand doesn't know what the right's doing. I think it's bonkers to focus on saying, well, I think it comes down to, okay, well, daddy government says that I'm right. I've been saying this for years, and, they finally have said, good job, you figured it out, great. You were right all along, sport, that kind of thing. And it's, I think that I don't want to simplify it as that's the motivation for there being, disclosure, quote unquote, but it's definitely a motivator, right? Because, we've been talking about this stuff for years, and how cool would it be to have a national government say, yeah, you're right, good job, you figured it out, all these years of you were researching, and you know what, you did it, job well done, go home. But the thing is, it's never going to end. There's no finish line. There's no, okay, well, you figured it out, good job, research is done, we know everything now. There is no finish line. And I think this sort of, there was a really interesting metaphor I heard an anthropologist use once, Dr. Shrivas, she was a professor of mine in college, where she says, there's an ideal that's presented, and, it's kind of like this ubiquitous thing in the clouds, and it's like, there it is, there's the ideal, but there's no way to get to it. That's a metaphor that was used for careers, but I think it makes sense in this respect, where there's this ideal of, okay, well, there is a truth, and an entity, a big, entity with influence believes this truth, therefore that is the ideal. But we're never going to get there, and it's never going to be the truth that everyone wants. It's always going to be like, bits and pieces or things that are thrown out to help you to make you misinterpret. And it's, it's one of those things where you're never going to get an answer, and it's never going to be satisfactory. So, I think it's a what's the word? I don't know, I can't think of a good word for it. I'll use a phrase then. It's a bait and switch, and it's like, it's a half truth and a half lie, and we're never going to get the full truth from anybody except from our subjective experiences, which no one's going to agree on. So. That's kind of my thoughts on it.
Okay, very good. We take our bottom of the show break a little bit early so we can get on to some of our longer questions. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM with our great special co-host today, Tim Swartz. And we'll be right back with more open lines on WOON.
The night is alive. Join us and take a walk on the weird side when you tune in to The Kingdom of Nye, hosted by Heather Wade, the finest in late night talk. Listen live free weeknights starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time at thekingdomofnye.com, talkstreamlive.com, and the Paranormal Radio app. Wanna take a ride?
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
And welcome back to WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM. It's Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno with our special guest co-host today, Tim Swartz. And we're dealing with your questions on open lines today. So do we have a question? I believe it's from Robbie.
We do. There are a couple more questions from Peter, though. I didn't know if you wanted to tackle them. One's actually specifically for Tim.
Well, let's do that then.
Yes. So,
okay.
Tim, we have one question about your new book, which Peter asks, can you tell us about your new book, The Dulce Warriors? And in the course of researching the topic, did you have any contact with any alleged witnesses? And what did you learn that may be new information?
Right. Well, this is a book that this is Timothy Green Beckley's. Unfortunately, this is his last book. He was putting this together when he passed away. And myself, Mr. Beckley, and Sean Castile had the majority of it written by the time Tim passed away. So as for anything new about the whole Dulce mystery, this really goes back to what we were talking about before the last break. This was a story that came out in the early 1980s and seems to have been a product of a massive disinformation campaign that was being put out by the Air Force against a man by the name of Paul Benowitz, who had contacted Kirtland Air Force Base there in New Mexico, saying that he had been photographing and videotaping strange lights over the base, and also intercepting radio signals that he thought were of alien origin. And the story goes that a guy there at the base by the name of Richard Doty started feeding Mr. Benowitz all kinds of misinformation in order to, put him off the trail, so to speak, to whatever was actually going on there, at that base. Some of that disinformation dealt with the alleged underground base at or close to Dulce, New Mexico, and talk about one of your worst science fiction nightmares. I mean, this base allegedly was manned by both humans and aliens, and they were doing all kinds of horrific genetic experiments on people. Kidnapping, part of the abduction scenario. Was brought into this, where people were being kidnapped and taken to this base to be dissected alive, and just all kinds of things. And I suppose that one of the things that we have learned in our research with this book is all the different personalities that came in and jumped onto this story for whatever reasons. That's one of the things that we'll discuss in this book, and it should be finished in less than a month, so be on the lookout for it. But I mean, you have people that really seem to have no connection. You have to realize that this was before, this was pre-internet, so you have people like Jason Bishop III and Cherry Hinkle and Paul Schneider, who was a late arriver on this, the William Cooper. I mean, all of these people became involved in this story with information that was either fed to them or they just simply made it up themselves. That's one of the things that we've been researching with this book is where was some of this other information? I mean, we have this information that was being fed to Paul Benowitz, but then there seemed to be other outlets of disinformation that were coming to these people. John Lear, that was another case. So I mean, and a lot of the wilder aspects of the UFO phenomena that came about in these early 1980 stories are with us today still. The reptilian race, some of the stuff that's being put out by QAnon, things like that. All of this can be traced back to what seems to have been a massive disinformation campaign that started in the early 1980s. So that's really, I think, one of the major fascinating aspects of this story.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that book. Why don't we get into Robbie's? We can sort of start. There's a lot to it.
Indeed. So we'll start with the first portion, which is Mr. Eno speaks about entities in a house, and at the time they would have been called demons, but because they had physical bodies, quote, it pushed back, unquote, they couldn't have been demons. That is wrong. Demons can present with a physical and spiritual body at the same time. They are very powerful beings. They can do almost anything they can think of. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to take that first portion?
Well, I take that first. Well, Robbie, I don't know where Robbie's from. Robbie mentions a show on, I think it was June 23rd, but we weren't on the air June 20th. I think he must be referring to the previous Sunday, which was the 20th. I wasn't sure whether he was listening to one of our shows or some show I was on.
Maybe it was posted on YouTube on the 23rd.
Well, whatever. I mean, he heard. I'm sure I said that, and I'm sure I was describing the Bridgeport poltergeist case of 1974 when we were attacked on the Monday night of the case. Ed and Lorraine Warren weren't in the house. I was kind of just there with the family and two other people, and I think he's. I don't know what you mean by a spiritual body. I know that there are spiritualist concepts of that. But I think he's referring to when I pushed at this entity, just trying to protect the little girl, and it pushed back, and it seemed very physical to me. That we believed these were demons, and the universal understanding at the time, as I understood it from my mentors, who were some of the greatest names in the field at the time, were that these were spirits, which by definition don't have physical bodies. Okay, now you could argue one way or the other on it, but that was the understanding. I did not mean to say by calling them parasites that they are not demons. Demons the term demons has all kinds of theological and pseudo-theological baggage that I'd rather not get into. These things from long and sorry experience with them. And Ben can attest to this too. They are parasitical. They feed on our negative energy. They will be whatever you want them to be if it helps them eat. They're part of nature. We believe that they can be mimics. But, as far as direct servants of a personal devil, I mean, I don't, they fill the bill. I've never seen any evidence that the theology on that is accurate. I don't think that's good enough, just like the spiritualist approach isn't good enough. Tim, what say you about this?
Well, it's like you said, I think that, people like to go and put religious names and descriptions on these things. And, but as we've seen throughout history, whatever your belief system, these things are more than willing to hop into that role. So, I mean, if you go back into, say, like the Middle Ages, and you said, oh well, these are demons, satanic minions, then yeah, that's what they are, and they'll go out of their way to make you think like that. Same thing with now. I think that some of the UFO phenomena is probably these things falling into that role. So, I mean, if you believe these things are little gray guys from Zeta Reticuli, then they will take on that persona. I like you said, I think that these things are a part of nature, and you can go and say that a lion is evil if he goes and drags you out of your tent and eats you, and I think it's the same way, with these things, evil, good. I don't think that those are good descriptions for these things. They just are.
No, I certainly agree. And something you said earlier, Tim, that I think we put labels on things that we can understand, especially when it furthers the narrative we believe in. And I've never found any of that to be good enough. Now, with all due respect to people's religious beliefs, I think that the same applies there. You get into interpretations of the Bible that were unknown before the alleged Reformation in the 1500s, and it really clouds the issue. So to approach it from an objective, scientifically as possible, is really the only choice we have. And this is what I've seen. Now, so I mean, whatever label you want to put on it, you've got demons, parasites, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. So, Ben, any comment on that particular first sentence there?
Yeah, I was reading through the rest of his message there, which is a lot of it can be boiled down to, I think I get what he's saying. I understand.
Yeah, I get it too.
I understand. I think that there's a really bad tendency, especially nowadays, for us to focus on the negative and to hyper-focus on it. And there's also a lot of ideas that persist throughout the human experience that just they haven't gone away. One of them being that there's a good God and a bad God, and they're constantly fighting, and they're equal in power, and they're just going to keep battling.
Yeah, Zoroastrianism.
Right, and that's it's interesting, right? I've taken a lot of time over the last couple of months to really kind of dig into where the ideas of where these ideas come from, right? Via ancient cosmology and stuff. That the devil and Satan, where there's no evidence that they're the same thing, right?
That's true. Very little known fact.
Right. There's no evidence anywhere in any biblical text, any ancient Sumerian text, nothing that they're even the same thing. And the ultimate conclusion of the early Christian church was, who cares? Because it's like, it doesn't matter. It's like, because the ultimate idea is, it's just to create chaos, right?
Right.
Every generation of, at least in the Western portion of philosophy or religion or whatever, has come up with their own sort of version of this sort of hierarchy of demons or whatever, which I think it's important to note, the origin of the word demon in the first place, right? From the Greek demos, which essentially just means, a personality or a power or some sort of, it's not even a god, it's the personality of a god that influences things, right? Socrates refers to his daemon when he's talking about his thoughts. If you ever read through any of his stuff, any of his dialogues, it's usually, if they translate it correctly, it'll be referred to as his demon, and he'll talk about it too. Be like, well, I was about to do this, but then, I had this intervention where I shouldn't have done this, and it influenced his thoughts, right? And that wasn't considered a bad thing.
Today they might call it guardian angel.
Right, exactly, because it's not something inherently evil, but over time, right? Because we as humans who want to have control over reality, we try to put words onto things, and if we can identify it, that means we can control it. So this whole idea of it is just there's no evidence of any hierarchy, structure, nothing. So it's just like, we know next to nothing except for, Paradise Lost and like, and you have like, Dante's Divine Comedy and like, you have all these sort of bits of literature, which I'm pretty sure the Divine Comedy, most of it was satire.
Yeah, actually, it's supposed to be.
So you can't even use that as a viable source. And Paradise Lost, it takes nothing from anywhere where there's the closest you have is a dude in like the 1st century, Dionysus the Areopagite, and even then it's like the ideas are like we don't really know, and so it's kind of one of those things where we have to go from what we know, which is nothing, and so we have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, all of it really, because it's a subjective experience of an objective reality, right? So now that we kind of have an idea, a base of what the old ideas of demons, now we have this word with a ton of baggage, and there's these evil hell beasts that are trying to consume us and eat us and whatever. It's like I don't know. It's I'm trying to remember where my point was. Oh yeah, so it's how we experience reality is informed by our experiences, what we know, and yes, it could be possible, but if you look back at what our ancestors experienced and how we interpret them now, how they experienced reality was just so different than how we experience it now. It's all of these things, right? It's like it's kind of like parasites, right? We'll go back to that. The more you focus on it, the more power you give it.
Absolutely right.
So if you focus on this idea of, there's a personal Satan devil out there, which it's entirely possible that there is.
Sure.
But the whole thing is, Dostoevsky makes a really interesting point in Brothers Karamazov, where one of the brothers he has a brain fever and he's a intelligentsia socialite from Moscow, and he gets a brain fever, and it's sort of like his guilt over the death of his father, and he has hallucinations, and he hallucinates a man in shabby clothes that are like fashions from like 5 or 10 years ago, and he's kind of like, it's described as he's a poor relation, and so he's having a conversation with this poor relation almost, and the poor relation reveals, oh well, I'm the devil. And he's not this like horrible winged beast. He's not like this goat-headed, thing. He's just a shabby relation. And so he has this the brother has this conversation with him, and he's like, I don't believe in God. And he was like, I don't need you to believe in God. He's like, but if you believe I exist, I win. and it's one of those things where, it's such a different viewpoint, because that's essentially what it is, right? A shabby relation that we can give power to or not. Yeah. And, ultimately, we can focus all we want on this spiritual warfare stuff, but at the end of the day, you still have to go to work. You got to do your 9 to 5. You got to provide for your family, and you can live in terror, or you can try and be a positive influence in the world. And do your best to not give power to these entities. There's a really interesting Gnostic idea, and this is the last thing I'll say, where there are these entities referred to as demons in the world, but they aren't, this is in the sense where they are lowercase g gods, but they can't be gods unless you give them power. And it's this, actually it's archons, I'm sorry. And it's the same sort of thing. Gnostics get a lot of things wrong, but I think that's really kind of interesting, that even with that it's like, it doesn't matter if you don't give them power.
Well, there you have it. All right. Thank you, Ben. I think we have time maybe for one more smidge of Robbie's point there.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, actually, he goes into a really interesting point, so we'll just power through it. So Robbie continues, I missed the next time, and I don't feel like going back to get it, but he speaks of the multiverse theory, and I will have to say I mostly believe he is correct. Most of these entities actually exist in a different world and are able to pass at will. To expand on what I said about these entities, creatures, or whatever, being religious in nature, I heard a guy speak a few months ago. I don't remember his name. You may know it. But until then, I did not put much stock in the UFO or alien idea. Until I heard him say that All of these UFO sightings and other creatures are nothing but demons disguising themselves. The more I think about it, the more I believe it could be true. That's not saying I don't believe it yet, but I do consider it a good possibility. Now, the part I was referring to mainly in the YouTube comment at about this time mark, Mr. Eno speaks about progressive ideas, people wanting something new, and other comments like that. He is somewhat correct there. People don't want to think about there being demons or evil spirits in the world. They want rational explanations for things, scientific explanations for things. But no matter what people want, no matter how hard we want to make it scientific or progressive thinking, the fact is all of these evil happenings in the world are still the workings of demons and Satan. I would have started off with this, but here is my resume in this. I have spent the better part of 30 years dealing with demons, evil spirits, hellhounds, infected houses, possessions, good spirits, and yes, angels. I've also dealt with a satanic church wreaking havoc on my area by summoning evil spirits and demons. After running them out of town, the activity has basically died around here. I have seen demons in the way that they are presented to people in general. I have seen them in their true form. I have seen things that would make most people completely lose touch with reality, both good and bad, because people don't want to think of these things exist. I knew they existed before I was thrust into this. I did not ask for this. I did not want to do this, but I was given a gift and put it in a position to use it, and I did. And that is the end of his comment.
Okay, well, I respect all that, and I think I will amplify what Tim said earlier, that, you've got parasitical entities, and I stick to that term, doing a lot of these things, but not all of these things. There are plenty of multiversal phenomena, or possibly alien phenomena, whatever sense you want to take that are not evil, that have nothing to do with Satan, or the devil, or as Ben was explaining before, and, I think to deny that is simply to do exactly what you're saying other people want to do sometimes, Robbie, and that's embrace their point of view and with a confirmation bias, so to speak. And I respect people's religious beliefs, including yours, because you're very strong on that. I'm strong on mine too. And but on the other hand, you've got to get away from the labels sometimes and take things the way they are. But we always interpret things according to our own points of view, and there's even in science, and there's really nothing that can be done about that. There's no way to prove who's right and who isn't, just to do the best we can, and as Ben has been saying, keep it positive. Tim, what say you?
No, I mean, I think that you said it quite well. I mean, we live in a very big universe, and there are a lot of mysteries that we'll probably never understand. But I think that if you're going out looking for demons and Satan, then you're probably going to find them. And I think that rather than dwelling on that, we should instead dwell on the goodness of the world, the goodness that we can do for others, and quit looking for something to blame for the bad things that are happening. There's always going to be bad things, whether or not they're caused by Satan and demons. I don't think that matters. Instead, we have to look at ways to make ourselves and help others and try to make a better world.
Yeah, I think that's the message of the three of us. As Ben said, don't make the poor relation a rich one, so to speak, but by giving it more power. Concentrate on the positive, concentrate on the unity. All right, and I think we've dealt with that question. That's thank you, Robbie, for sending in the questions. I think we have time here. Maybe we can squeeze in one more here. This is from Phil, and Phil is one of our show reporters in the heart of the Litchfield Triangle in Connecticut.
Yes, and Phil writes to us. In reference to your work with patients at a psych ward in the 1970s, can you mention a specific case that really brought home to you the notion that these poor souls weren't crazy at all, and they were actually multiverse aware, and the voices they heard were as real as you or me?
Okay, well, briefly, when I was in the seminary, I did, as part of pastoral training, we were working in, I did some work at the Norwood State Hospital in Connecticut with my brother's good friend, Father Al Jaquinto, over the summers in the 70s, who was a fellow Sulpician priest with my brother and a wonderful fellow. But more so at the St. Lawrence State Hospital in Ogdensburg, New York, which was near the seminary where I was working with the priest who was turned out to be the diocesan exorcist and also the chaplain at this state hospital. So I think the background behind Phil's question is that I've often stated that it seemed to me that when you look into the eyes of many of these people who were diagnosed schizophrenic, they seemed in some cases saner than the hospital staff, and they seem to be experiencing real worlds that today I would explain, if this theory is correct, by the experience of parallel worlds. There wasn't so much one case that there are a number that stand out, but it's sort of a collective impression that I received. Probably the weirdest day I ever spent there, and I apologize if I've said this before, I'm sure I have on the air, but for those of you who haven't heard it, one of the doctors said, you have to meet this fellow. You've heard the jokes about people who think they're Napoleon. Well, we have one of the elderly patients who actually does think he's Napoleon. And I sat down with him. He was brilliant, lucid, and talked with as though he'd been at the battles of Borodino or Waterloo, and as if he'd known some of the top French generals. And something. It was incredible. And I'm a lover of history, and so this was a real treat for me. And he was bedridden. He was very elderly, but he'd been diagnosed schizophrenic, and one of the most stimulating conversations I'd ever had. But in the end, my curiosity was getting the best of me. He said, "How did you know, or who told you were Napoleon?" And he said very seriously, looking me straight in the eye, he said, "God told me." And the fellow in the next bed, who'd been lying there like a big lump, leaned over, he turned over and said, "I did not." So I said, all right, that wasn't the end of my crazy day at the hospital, but the two of them, they were just brilliant. It was amazing. So I guess on that note, we can get to our announcements on a positive note there, and we will take that at this point. Ben, take it away.
Indeed. So on Tuesday, September 21st, my dad and I will present a program on my dad will, not me. We'll present a program.
You're welcome to join.
I could join, and I could give marginal comments, and everyone would love it. On UFOs, cryptids, and ghosts via Zoom to Mainline MUFON in Philadelphia. You can check out Mainline, MUFON.com for more details.
And on Friday, October 8th, I'll present a paranormal overview at a somewhat unlikely venue, the Arizona Dowsers Conference at the Little America Hotel in Flagstaff near the Grand Canyon. Hopefully I won't fall in. Visit dowserssouthwest.com for more information.
And we will present once again at the Western Connecticut UFO Conference, I should say, during the last week of October this year. That's on Sunday, the 24th. We'll do a live simulcast with the conference. This will be an open line show format with Kathleen Martin taking questions from conference participants and our global audience on the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case, of which 2021 is the 60th anniversary. Wow. On the following Saturday, COVID variants permitting, we'll present live at the Danbury, Connecticut Public Library to wrap up the conference. Other presenters that week include Mark D'Antonio, Tom Reed, Michael Scratt, Linda Zimmerman, and Mike Panicello from Connecticut MUFON.
Now, Tim, tell us about what's going on with you, your books, website, etc.
Sure. Well, like I said, right now we are working on finishing Tim Beckley's of the Dulce Warriors. You can find all of our information at our website, conspiracyjournal.com. All of our books are still available on Amazon.com. Just type in my name, Tim Beckley's, Sean Castile. You'll find them all. I recommend them all.
Very good. We'll look forward to that. We remind you we have a charity page at BehindTheParanormal.com. Please check those out. We know these people, and they are very, very well worth donating to and supporting. So, Ben, what is cooking for next week?
Well, next week we have prepping in the fridge, soon to be thrown into the oven. On August 29th, we'll bring you a show, that we've been looking forward to, an in-depth look at near-death experiences, or NDEs, with Dr. Jeffrey Long, one of the leading experts on the subject.
I'm looking forward to that show particularly because when I was talking to him last time, I have a number of almost every day experiences that he would attribute to near-death experiences. So I don't know if I'm dying or
feeling
just
okay, Dad?
Yeah, I mean it's something I really want to get into. Certain things that have happened. But anyway, I found that intriguing, and if I last long enough to be on the show next week, then we'll get into that.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, Dad, you don't look a day over 40.
Well, Ben, that's what. Well, thank you. I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so we'll leave you today with an appropriate for today's weather thought, I guess, from person or persons unknown. If you want to enjoy the rainbow, you must first endure the storm. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno.
And I'm Tim Swartz. Thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Local and live at 99.5 FM.